Hello, my friends. Finally back at it. 2 months off, running around the world. Back to it. Back home in Oakland for a little bit. Gonna go to LA next week. Back for Thanksgiving. Do a little Nashville. Do a little Miami. What's up? What's up? I'm just gonna go ahead and get Jon right on here.
What's up, buddy?
Has it really been 2 months, did you just say?
Has it been 2 months? I think so. Something like that.
Wow, it felt like a month, but it felt way too long. I was really excited about this.
Well, it's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
I like the love in the chat already. Somebody said it was their first live. Welcome to your first viewing. This is our.
Wow.
I inaccurately wrote our 202nd live with MattRad on the post, but it is in fact the 102nd time I've gone live. The vast majority with.
I was like 200. I think that's a typo.
It's a typo. Hey man, you don't do something for 2 months. You get off your game. You start throwing typos in and messing things up.
I have a really important question to start this one off with. And it's going to be very difficult. What was the most remarkable meal that you had all the way around the world?
Okay, I got to think. So after when I was in the Bay, and I think I was in Nashville, New York, London, Paris, 2 different places in Bali, Sydney, Tasmania. Mm-hmm. Most remarkable meal. Oh man, I'm unprepared for this question.
I know, that's why I didn't text it to you. I wanted to do it here. Put the pressure on you.
You know, the most remarkable meal I would say is actually a trio of meals, because I went to the same place 3 nights in a row. Actually, someone on the Discord recommended it, and then someone I met in Tasmania mentioned it or recommended it. I went to a restaurant called Sunny, Sonny, in Hobart, Tasmania, because I went there for my birthday weekend to go to this museum, Mona, which was unbelievable.
That looked crazy.
It's so crazy. I'll tell you more about it. By the way, I'll be in LA next week. Let's have dinner. Yeah. Man, it was so great. But there's this great little wine bar called Sunny. Shout out Al, who's become a friend of mine and Instagram friends. I doubt he will watch this, but maybe I'll tell him about it. Man, they just, it's the you would love it, of course. It's the perfect little wine bar. They got a chef making, 8 things on the menu on a chalkboard, and when they're out of it, they just wipe it for the night. It's from oysters to prosciutto toast to crudité, just like little bits of food.
It's my vibe.
Amazing wine selection, and they're playing with 2 giant speakers in the corner of the room, playing. This guy Al, who basically runs it, is playing one side of a vinyl record that he just switches, and it's from Bowie, Prince, old funk, just a super vibe. So I was recommended to go there. I was in Tasmania for 3 nights, and I went there 3 nights in a row, and it was amazing. Incredible each time. So that was the best experience.
I have to say, my gut said when you answered the question you were going to pick Tasmania, so I was right. I kind of had a feeling you were going to say something in Tasmania over everywhere else you've been.
Well, and there were I had lots of good recommendations for things to do in Tasmania, because it's a beautiful place with lots of natural wonder and lots of kind of farm to table local stuff, amazing restaurants. And I ended up just going to Mona for 3 days and this one restaurant, Sunny, which was just amazing. Sort of more of a wine bar than a restaurant, but great food. And yeah, man, just went there. You know me, if I like something, I'm just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, same.
I'm a creature of habit, so
yeah.
I'll probably go back to Tasmania at some point and actually do more, go finding waterfalls and cool stuff like that. But I had such a blast.
Well, that's a great segue, creature of habit, to what I want to discuss with you today. So, the idea of rewriting your own story.
Okay.
And touching on you kind of do this all the time, doing like different things all the time, traveling, whether that's for writing, we always talk about you doing mixing, production, writing, and kind of doing these like separate bouts of these things for longer periods of time, sometimes shorter, bouncing in and out, keeps you kind of, fulfilled creatively. And for me, it's been the opposite, which is just I double down and I mix. I'm not saying I'm going back to production or anything, but I every year we've talked, or the last 2 years we've done this, we've talked about the mix bus. We've talked about like, oh, I change my mix bus every year. It's like so lame. Who the fuck talks like that? Like, oh, cool.
Mixers.
Cool. This is an engineering production forward creativity podcast, and live on Instagram. But I know that's the purpose, but we've had plenty of episodes where we think deeper than that. And it's funny that the Hazel Riggs just signed in and said good afternoon, because they're part of this conversation, though they don't know it. So I was going to text them. Before this to just be polite, but now that they're here, I'm considering selling all my gear and starting over again.
Interesting.
But everything but their Fern gear, so they can still have some love. And downsizing, just for the sake, I was even considering like the big speakers, like selling literally, like really, I've landed on, I probably won't do that. But just the idea of really shaking things up a bit and rewriting the story that I've been diving really deeply into you here, this like kind of anti-compression conversation that I've, reassessed recently, and I'm actually compressing so much recently on this album that I'm doing that I'm loving. Just on every track, there's some sort of compression happening. It's just the genre wants it, and just always pushing back against myself. And I feel like I use this platform with you to just say things out loud and see what sticks, because then I can hold myself accountable. And you can hold me accountable, and my friends and my peers can all hold me accountable and each other accountable. This morning, I was held deeply accountable, and I'm going to publicly say this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. But Oak Sound reached out to me this morning on email about my Soothe rant on Live with Matt Rad, and referred to me and my thoughts as emotionally weighted, which is amazing, and it's correct. I sometimes feel that some tools can need to be explained in dire context, because they can do more harm than good. And they agreed with a lot of the things, and we're going to have a conversation about the plugin and about how things can be improved and how maybe they can market things differently, because people don't fully understand, especially young engineers and producers don't fully understand the power of dynamic tools. And their tool is extremely powerful. And I personally, as I went on the rant, and they seem to agree with, I think heavy-handed, that thing causes a lot more harm than good. So to not know how to do it and just be like, oh, this thing, whatever, like, it's crazy. It's like, no, it's not like that. So anyway, I was held accountable to my language, and I didn't realize that, people actually watch this.
People watch these things. It's kind of great, honestly. This is what it should be, man. This is like you said, this is exactly why we do this, to be able to say things out in the world and get feedback, because I've had conversations about these lives while traveling, because it turns out there's people in random places that really love these conversations, and it's really cool to hear. And it's always great when people come up to me, or their friend does this and they watch the lives. It's so cool. A big part of why we do this is because it is both a dialogue for you and I, as I've told people. We started this when we were lonely and alone in our places at the beginning of the pandemic, missing the conversations in the studio with other engineers and producers and writers and musicians, and just being able to have these conversations. But now it's sort of a mutant version of it, where we have these on a live, but now there's a Discord community, and there's brands watching it, and there's people watching it, and people consume it in different forms. And so it really is a larger dialogue, which is a great thing. I love that you're getting feedback from people positively, and not necessarily negatively, but pushing back on you pushing, because that's what we hope happens here, is that more dialogue happens, more people have intense conversations, and then we all evolve from it, because we're not trying to stay static. We're trying to, part of the reason I have these conversations is you're doing something new, I'm pushing back, you're pushing back, and we're learning new things and trying new things. So I'm excited. So what else in this journey? Where are you at with it? And it's
very new. It's less than a week old. I'll tell the story really quickly, because he's on the live right now, Mike Miller, who's obviously one of my closest friends, and we're doing a lot of Atmos mixing together. He called me one day to tell me he was in a room with MB3 XPDs from PMC, and how, you know, how great my mixes sounded, and like he was playing them in comparison, and he's just, you know, trying to like talk me up and make me feel good, because I kind of get in my head about the fact that I kind of mix differently than a lot of people, and I feel like I've always tried to have a differentiator. But at the same time, like, Manny's working more than me, you know, Serban's working more than me, Spike Stenton's working more than me, and they've been working more than me for 3 decades. So, you know, in comparison of mixes, you know, Mike is a great friend and wants to lift me up. But when he said that in comparison, he thought my mixes sounded, you know, deeper, wider, bigger than some of their work that we agree is amazing work, like some of Manny's best mixes. I didn't say anything except for, okay, cool, I'm going to sell them. Like, that was my initial reaction. I was like, oh, I'm going to sell them because I want to de-differentiate. In a sense, I want to be able to chameleonize myself and mix like other people for the sound that they want, right? It's not even mixing like Serban, mixing like I can't. We all have different ears, so our ears are differentiators. But if there's a reason why clients, artists, managers, producers, teams, whatever, want to cycle their you know, intellectual property and art through these camps, there's a reason why this has worked for 3 decades, and I'd be absurd of a human to not want to understand that, respect that, and just like go left for the sake of going left. I think by default, I'm always going to go a little left, and that's fine. But what do these people do? And studying their business models, being inspired by their business models, you know, and part of that to me is maybe mixing on smaller speakers, mixing on 2-ways. They more traditionally and classically translate to smaller devices a bit better than 3-way active speakers that are just like as good as it gets, you know?
Yeah.
So I was toying with the extreme of just selling them, but there's something about the low end and having access to that. That's why you go to build mains in a softeted into a great studio, like a Sterling Sound or something like that, where there's a clarity to the low end that if I already have them, I should probably keep my access to them. But maybe figure out a way to set up a rig off to the side that's a bit more traditional and standard, and maybe I'll push into things a little harder because of that, because maybe, you know, it'll offer me a different sensibility that I'm not used to, because I've had these same speakers alone for 6 years now. I think I've had the same speakers with only the phone and AirPods, and I've talked about this before, not needing that. I'm now realizing that I might need that, right? So that's the whole point of our dialogue, and why I want to talk about this live and not just keep this internal with my friends I'm discussing this with. I think everybody should be questioning, you know, I put something on Instagram the other day that a lot of engineers seem to like, which is, what did I say? Workshop the workshop so the work works in and out of the shop. Like, I'm not trying to make records that only work in my studio. That makes no sense. So you should keep workshopping the place that you're creating in order to make sure that it works both there for you, because you do want to put some artistry and creativity in it, but mostly outside of the workshop. Nobody wants their couches, their fucking sofas and marble tables to sit in the workshop only. They want to work inside someone's interior design in their home as a centerpiece. You want the record to play in a restaurant, in a car, in the subway, through your AirPods with all that fucking noise and the noise canceling phase issues happening. We have to consider all of this. So I think that I've been a little bit short-sighted on where things need to feel for myself to get satisfaction out of it. And I'd like to remove myself from it next year, and have more of like maybe a twin identity search or no identity search within like me as Castelli as a mix engineer. So that's the overarching.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like there are several ways that I think about what you just said, and maybe I'll just hit a couple of them and see which train of thought you find the most interesting. I think there's something interesting about doing things the way you want to do them because you love them in the purest sense as an artist. I think about this a lot with what I do, where, you know, I think you and I both have a skill set where if we decided to only be mastering engineers, we could do that. If only be mixers, we could do that. Be a producer, we could both do that. We both, you certainly, even though you haven't been a producer in a while, I'm confident you could be a producer writer if that's where your passion lies. And I kind of jump between them because that seems to be the most satisfying for my brain. So the question of what do you want to do versus how do you optimize the business model to have the most financial and career success, what you're doing that for, why you're doing that. Do you want to make the most money? Do you want to sit in a lane that is not as high tier as Manny and Serban, who are making the most money and getting the most work? What do you sacrifice to get there? I think that's an interesting thing. I also think there is we haven't talked about it a lot. And actually I was talking to Rory, who's been amazing on the Discord. Rory is just throwing knowledge, like paragraphs of knowledge and feedback. I think I'm going to have him on in the next week or so, next couple of weeks, and talk about mastering. I think that the role of a mix engineer who brings up all the faders from nothing, starts at zero, and then mixes a song. There's much fewer of those role, much less of that role that is necessary these days. That's something I know you can do. Kian does it a lot because that's more in the genre that he works in. Shout out Grammy-winning mix engineer Kian Reardon, who's also amazing on the Discord. But you and Baines and Tizio and some of the other regulars on here are doing more pulling up stems, where a producer, vocal engineer are really dialing in the sounds, and you are reacting more as a finesser of their intent and then bringing life in a expert sort of engineer way that they can't do themselves. And there's something about that to my overall brain that is closer to mastering than the old school mixing. And so I wonder also if there is if there is going to be a business model that pops up that is something akin to stem mixing and mastering, that is sort of a new thing that's all in one. If you have vocal engineers and producers, and lots of producers watch this, if people can dial in the mix to 90-95%, is there one role that is the finisher, mixer, mastering engineer person at the end? I think there's I think that's going to come up at some point. I don't know. I know there's people kind of doing versions of that, but I think there's something interesting there. I can't remember the third thing I thought of as you were talking about this, but I think both of those are kind of interesting topics. I also, sorry, if you have a reaction to that.
I do. I'm on one project this year. I'm doing it now. It's an album I'm doing that I can't wait for it to come out so I can maybe talk about it. But I am heavy lifting. And it's a very much my type of record for that to have happened. I feel very lucky. Meaning the rough mixes come in at -20 and things are mono that don't need to be mono, and it feels like a console mix. Now faders are at 0, but I'm changing balances and it's going over really well. Yeah. And I feel like a mixer. That makes me feel like a mixer. I don't feel like, and we've talked about this before, you and I, both of us, maybe me more so now that I'm just identifying as a mixer in the industry, that I came from the time where I've mixed on a console. I know what it's like that's where my solo mode and my mute mode comes from, is put the faders down. I've done that. Right at the fringe of where that kind of died out and the in the box mixing started, that's where my mentality is and is always going to be somewhat, but that's not what most people want. So we've talked about this a lot as well, where I don't like other people's mix buses dictating the overall intensity of a thing. So I like to spread that out through subgroups. And I know that's how Serban likes to work. I know that's how a lot of people probably work, where you're not relying on, what people just heavy-handedly dropped on with a preset of Ozone or something, even though I would say Ozone.
For people that aren't exactly familiar, you're basically, there are mixes that you get where a lot of the sound and the intensity and the loudness and the brightness and all that comes from some heavy-handed master bus stuff, mix bus stuff. And so you are trying to basically recreate that through other means that are more flexible so you can get the same effect without just relying on their,
So then enter 3 weeks ago, I was doing a single for an artist that producer A&R were loving it, but the drums didn't hit the same as theirs in the third chorus or whatever. Just some very specific thing. And I tried 2 passes and I couldn't get it quite right. It's not really my style of how I would mix drums. So then I decided I could just tell that they weren't thrilled. And you know how I'm going to get if someone's not thrilled with what I'm doing. I'm like, oh, fuck, what's going on? I started over with the producer's mix bus on without touching his mix bus. I remixed it with that mix bus on, and I got capital letters. That's what I'm fucking talking about, or something like, like a really high enthusiasm, which is what you want. I was like, oh, they just wanted what they had with that 5%. And that's fine. Within that 5%, I was able to make it feel way more compelling vocally. Like I was able to do a lot in there, but not as much as I think I need to do. Right. So that's an ego thing. That's not even an ear thing. It's potentially a taste thing, but I think it's more ego than anything. And I would like to not care about the attack speed on someone's mix bus compressor that's already on. That to me is sucking out transients, but it's also making the kick drum go whatever, knock in that spitty way. That's what they want. If they want that, why am I going to try to convince them they don't want it? That's like telling someone to eat broccoli that hates fucking broccoli. It's like, oh, but this one's different because it's got more garlic. It's like, what? You don't like broccoli? You don't fucking like the texture of broccoli?
23 minutes until we got into a food reference. Keep going.
No. We started with a food reference.
Fair. You asked the food question. Keep going. Sorry.
I was like, I wanted to make sure we were 30 seconds in. The food references tend to work in my favor. I don't want to try to convince people of anything anymore, except for back to what I learned a decade ago from Spike Stent. Kian talks about it all the time. The first pass is how I hear it. So if I want to take the time, so maybe I take 4 hours to do my first pass, and I'm like, this is how I'd love it to sound. What do you think? But then be willing to just start over again if they're not feeling that direction. I think that I get a little hung up on, oh, well, maybe I can make what they want work from my first direction, but really it's already so dismantled into another direction that I can't actually rebuild it from there. So I should just start over. And I don't do that often enough versus when you console mix or you mix from zero, you're starting over a lot. And that's kind of how I started mixing was before I sent to a client, I might have tried 6 mixes, and I don't do that anymore. I work and I send it, and I'm just like this appeared confidence. It's like somehow I'm confident. I don't know how I got this way, but I'm mostly not. So I'm not quite sure why I feel that way when I send a mix, and then when I get back, it's good, but it's like no. I want capital letters, or I want fire emojis, or I want exclamation points.
Well, this is an interesting thing about the expectation of mixes now, because I still get, I don't know, maybe it's A&Rs and managers, maybe it's artists, whatever. When people send me stuff, they always go, well, it's not mastered, or say something like that. I'm like, like I misunderstand. It's like, I feel like that's like language from 2 decades ago, because everything is mixed now. Everything is mixed. Everything is mastered. Because everybody has ozone. It doesn't mean that it's done well or it couldn't be done better, but like, you said you're getting rough mixes that are -20. Like that is such a rarity. That's like getting a jazz demo or something. Like it doesn't exist anymore. Like
but of hundreds of mixes this year, that's been 5 so far.
Yeah, exactly. So you're at a single-digit percentage of songs that you're receiving as a mixer, hearing roughs that aren't already super loud and super bright and mixed by someone who may not be as experienced as you or may not be able to get the subtleties out of it. But everybody's mixing everything, and we can get into the larger conversation of when does everybody just start co-mixing and how does mixing and mastering overlap? Like, I really think there's something there going forward. I know that there were people, as soon as I said that, there were people in the chat talking about stem mixing and stem mastering, all that stuff. But the role and the expectation of mixing for most popular music, which includes hip hop, R&B, pop, whatever, is that mixes, I think people's ears are not going to change that much from the rough. They're going to be a better version of the rough. That's mostly what people, whether they know it or not, that's kind of the expectation now. And when I've done some mixing on a few artists recently. Again, I don't do a lot of mixing, but when I do mixing, it's really a lot of like, everybody loves the rough. They're looking for some slightly better version of the thing that they already have, not a new mix, even though they may be talking about it as though we're excited for you to now mix it. That does not mean the same thing as it did 15 years ago. I basically, maybe up until like 5 or 8 years ago. Now mixing really is like, give us a slightly better, louder, brighter, clearer version of the thing we already have.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting change to think about. I mean, and we're also we're talking about, not talking about what mixing is now, but we're talking about what a mixer gets hired for a lot of times now, because like I said,
yes,
a lot of the quote unquote mixing in the old school sense, which, you know, let's actually go back like to the Jeff Emmerich Beatles era and before. Engineering is now like, that's what engineering used to be. There weren't mix engineers in the 1950s and 60s. There were just engineers. There weren't multi-tracks in the same way. Multi-tracks really didn't happen until late 60s, and even then all the sound of a record and the quote unquote mixing is all done by the engineer. And we're kind of in a weird way circling all the way back to that. You know, I did a thing for Baines, the AES online thing with Baines and Tizio and Lauren D'Elia and Liz Robeson, talking a lot about really the role of the vocal engineer in pop and hip hop, and they're getting the whole sound and then sending the vocal stem, the mixed vocal stem. That's why there's so much co-mixing in that world. It's because the vocal engineer is getting the sound exactly how they want it, with the compression, with the throws, with the tune, with the automation, with the ad-lib sound and all that kind of stuff, and then sending it to the mixer. I don't know, that we're getting this weird like full circle thing where mixing is being done by the engineer / the producer. I don't know what it all means.
I've been talking about this since Talk came out, whenever that was, 4 years ago, with Dennis Koziak. We tried it, which is, you have an artist that you've done 50 songs, 100 songs with as an engineer. You've brought it down to 10 to 14 songs to make an album. And now you've have no perspective, but everyone likes it where it's at. So you need to bring someone in to help you finish it, whether that's your topic of discussion of, is that a mastering engineer, stem mastering? Is it a mixer? Let's get the title out of it. You have a trusted source that comes in to help you finish it. You do that all the time. And I don't look at your credits to be like, oh, is he a mixer? Like, Matt Rad touched this thing. Like, so he did it. I mean, I can figure out by asking you what you did on the record if I want to find out, but it doesn't matter because someone trusted you to come in and finish it. So I've talked about this for years about the co-mix, because the co-mix isn't like, oh, 2 mix engineer friends come together and mix the song. It's no, the trusted engineer with the artist brings in another producer, another mixer to come in and finish it with them, with the trust of the artist at hand, so they can put you in check. So when I start doing crazy things to Khalid's vocal, Dennis goes, I think you went a little too far. And I go, cool, you back it off. You know, like, take what I just did and then bring it back to the world that he wants to be in. And I think that's the trusted source of co-mixing that I was talking about, which is more about the fresh perspective. So someone could take it, someone like me, someone like Tizio, with, I think someone just posted on a comment about Jack Harlow's engineer. It's like, you know, Tizio was brought in to help finish some things, like with the engineer. That's like part of the relationship building, which is, okay, I know I've gotten it so far. Credit both of you. Let's, like, I got asked on the Macklemore album if his engineer could be co-mix credit on a couple of the songs because he felt like he did a lot. I was like, absolutely he can. If we're both credited as a mixer, then we both win. And then we both get hired for more work. It's not like one versus the other, but the co-mix isn't 2 friends coming together to mix a song. It's this person can take this over the edge and where I've left off, and I'm going to convince the artist I need a little bit of help, and we're going to do it together in the room at the same time, or we're going to do it in separate spaces, and we're going to send it back and forth between the 2 of us first before we show it to the artist, because the artist trusts the engineer that's been doing 50 songs with them.
Yes, and it's that mixing is taking place as soon as things are being tracked and as things are being made, much like back in the 60s. even the 70s, and back when there was more old school engineering.
Bruce Swedian recorded and mixed.
Yes. And so, but the fact that you are not connected to, if you're going to mix several hundred songs, you're not there for the recording process of most of them. So there's some mixing being done, who knows how much. And this is one of the things, like, people I've already seen in the chat asking, like, well, should that be a co-mix credit? Does this person get? And the answer is these things are just changing rapidly. Yes. So how you figure that out is kind of a moving target. It's one of the things I talked about on this AES thing, is how people get credited, and the technology is changing and the roles are changing, and every case is different. And so many of the credits that exist are credits that are based on business models and based on royalty streams. And, as I'm sure we've said it before, but the difference between a vocal producer, an additional producer, a co-producer, all show up slightly differently. They're different for what is implied for a royalty. I've gotten additional production credit and gotten a royalty. And this early on, like one of the early One Direction songs, a Little Mix song that became big hits, my name is not listed as a producer on Spotify because my credit was an additional producer, even though I did the same role of finisher and I got a royalty point on it. So I'm really a co-producer, but the credits don't show up a certain way. And once I realized that, me and my manager at the time were like, oh, it's co-producer forever now. There's no, and I'll get calls say, we're going to do some ad prod. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll do additional production. The credit is co-production because I'm finishing your record and I'm getting a royalty. Yes. But those things are all negotiable and all change. And now the Grammy's done some changes where there's songwriter things and songwriters get, so there's, in terms of what the credits are, it's almost, it's an interrelated conversation or set of conversations. I think I'm, and at least in our conversation right now, most interested in the roles and what we're actually doing. Because when people say mix, the song needs to be mixed, what does that actually mean? And that's really changing. It's interesting.
Let's take another way into it, because we've talked about mixing and mastering changing. Let's start talking about recording and producing changing, so we can just see if there's any overlap here or another way in, which would be, if we're saying that the mixing is changing and the mixing is more like stem mastering, which I don't agree with. I don't actually like that at all. I don't have any full thoughts on why I don't just yet. I just don't think it's the same thing when you have access to all the individual stems versus like stem mastering would be like a drum stem, bass stem, blah, blah, blah. I get individual, so I can't really say that I'm stem mastering.
By the way, I don't really know about stem mastering. It's just like all these things.
It's a thing.
But stem mastering could, like, again, that's just a name for like a much more limited version of what you're doing that is not mastering in the old school sense of here's a 2-track that doesn't have a limiter, but it's obviously not.
Let's move back. Let's move backwards in time. So now there's different demands by the artist label for the production to translate as if it's competitive next to things that are released in order for them to believe in it. So now the demands of the engineer and the producer are higher. So that changes the role of the engineer and the producer. Changes the needs to meet a demand and an expectation of the engineer and producer role in the overall product wheel that is record making as a whole. If you're thinking about some sort of visual, like what's the word? Oh my God, fucking mind blanking.
Well, it might
assembly line. In the assembly line of making it, they're still in the same process in the beginning, right? So the recording engineer that used to record an amp with a mic, maybe putting it through a bunch of pedals and sound designing along with the producer. Now you're doing that in the box and you're calling that mixing because you're using plugins and you're EQing, versus you would do that on a console. You would filter, you would put a space echo on it, you'd put some sort of harmonizing engine on it, whether it's outboard or whatever, and that was recording and producing. So as a team, the engineer with the producer are shaping the arrangement and the sound.
And I think there's very little of that role as an engineer at all anymore. I mean, there's vocal engineers.
No. That's what's happening. No, that's literally what's happening. That's why
what I'm saying is that most producers just do that.
Sure.
Like
So yes, but the byproduct of the producer is now they're also engineering. So what I'm getting at is that if there's no engineer in the room, then the producer becomes the producer and the mixer, even if they hire a mixer? Question mark.
That's what I do. I mean, I'm mostly mixing, but
no, hold on. But you're not if you have Serban mix your song, right? You are passing it off. If you're doing both, then of course you're doing both. But for you to then say, hold on, you've done it all, and you're deciding, right? This is a decision. You're deciding to start EQing things as if you're a mixer before someone's mixing. You are doing that in order to meet a demand and an expectation of an artist's ears that is going to be putting it next to Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal and wanting it to hold up, not realizing what a demo or a rough mix used to sound like, right? That's all gone.
But I don't know if it's the expectation. It's all expectation. It's also just the tools available, you know, especially like you're talking about getting rid of your gear. A bedroom producer is going to, if everybody's working in the box, and I know you're not completely working in the box, there's some outboard gear, but essentially we talk about this, everybody pretty much has the same tools. It's really about ears and relationships and all these other things.
Yes.
They're doing it because they can. Like, why not try to make your recording sound? It's not just like, oh my God, they're going to expect it to be loud and bright. It's like, no, this is what I do. This is all part of the process. All these people watching our streams are, you know, if it's a 20-year-old producer, they're mixing all their stuff too.
You got to find another way into this because that's not what I'm trying to say. I think if you're a producer and you're EQing, you're doing like a mix technique. Yeah, obviously you're
tracking, like to even just get.
You do as you're tracking. What I'm trying to say is all the roles are evolving in a different way into the necessity of the mixer maybe being a smaller percentage on most records. Let's be honest, most records, but a lot of those producers still want it to be mixed because they know that there's going to be a je ne sais quoi from someone that just like sparkles and does this thing that just makes it feel how they're used to music feeling.
The outside ear, it's like, do you need multiple layers of mixer and mastering engineer and pay that money and give away the fee and the credit and whatever? And maybe the answer is yes. I don't know.
Yes. What I'm saying is I think I would argue that all of that is still in the production, and then mixing and mastering is in the post-production. So there's still a mixer that comes in to mix the song post-production. And the mixing that happens in the production is still in the production and not mixing. You're not perspective of only mixing. You're still working within a larger frame of things that can be changed. There's a psychological experience that works for most artists and songs. Obviously there's things that gets changed when a mix is, you know, clarifying things and bringing, you know, exposing, and you might go back and change bits in the production. But when it's handed off to the mixer, there is now this sense of we're moving on to another place, and someone else is saying that was the production is done. Now we're mixing. That I think we shouldn't lose in the perspective shift of where things are at in the assembly line of record making. So to say that you're mixing while you're producing, sure. I don't think there's any value in saying that you're not. Like, I'm not going to be like, you're not a mixer if you're, you know, EQing and compressing your sound sources. But that's recording. That's engineering. And then there's another trusted source to finish it that's a mixer. And then there's the mastering. And then all of these bits are just shifting forward. I don't think anything's going backwards. I think we're going backwards in time to if the same engineer recorded it and mixed it. That was a thing in the 60s and 70s. And I still wish that was happening more today. I think the perspective idea that I'm going back to is a little bit tough when you're in the same room with the same people, really loud, late nights, and then like now you're putting together a record. You should probably have someone else come help you finish it. But I don't think you should hand it off and not have any say in what you're doing. That's my argument for the co-mix. But I don't think you're now mixing it because I gotta do this because like the artist is on a phone call and like we're not taking a break and I'm just gonna keep making it sound different and different and different until someone comes back in the room and it's like, oh, it's better now. It's like, is it better or did you have it? And you could have just closed the session and moved on and not mixed it. And someone else mixed it even better than you did because now you're a mixer because you think you're supposed to be. And I think there's a lot more nuance to this than just saying mixing is happening 5% of the time now by a mixer. I think you've been mixing it, you might be causing more harm than good. And now everybody likes it because it's louder. And then the mixer has to go backwards to bring it 5% forward. But a lot of the time, we're actually backing off a lot of things in order to bring it forward by that 5%. So that feels more like mixing to me, which is fixing a lot of problems to then enhance it by 5% prospectively to the listener. But we had to do a lot more work in order to do that. Anyway, there's a lot there.
Real quick, I have some thoughts on it, but how's my level? People were saying that my level dropped significantly. Can people hear me on the chat?
Fine to me.
See what that's like. I think some of what you said I agree with. I think other aspects of it, this is how all records were made from the 30s up until the 60s, which is there was no outside mixer. They didn't give it to somebody at the end. That's just records were made in the room, and that's how records were made. It's only once you have multi-tracks and you can give it to somebody else afterward that changes. I don't know. I don't know that I have I don't know if I have. I know I don't have the same opinion as you that we need to hold on to something about people mixing or not mixing in the room or whatever before they hand it off.
That's what I'm saying. There's no value to holding that yes or no. There's no yes or no. But all I'm saying is to assume that you are when the label and the team hasn't agreed to release your version, you probably didn't fully mix that song. And I think that's what I'm saying when people or someone asked about like rates and like when you're co-mixing, like do you get a mix rate on top and a point? It's like, well, as the engineer of an album, you should get an overriding point as the recording engineer anyway. So are you entitled to the mixer point as well? I would say no, just because the amount of points that artists even have to give up. If you have your overriding point as the engineer on a whole album, then
which,
the
by
mixer.
The way, I think nobody has. There's no.
Yes, they do.
Engineers get points on albums
that are involved in the process of vocal recording and vocal. I know that.
Vocal producers do, but engineers generally don't get and never get royalties.
Engineers that are recording and their artist wants to take care of them. I know plenty of them. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a very small number of people. It's the vast minority of engineers.
But there's a deep connection. Yeah, what I'm saying is that role exists,
you're talking about a very small number of people. So there's a lot of people watching this that are engineers. Every producer gets a royalty, 99%. It's probably 1% of engineers or less of people that are getting paid as an engineer. Yes, there are people that are very close to artists and have that necessary role, but you're talking about a very, very rarefied era of people. I mean, you talk about as a mixer, you didn't even get a point until you had big success. Like mixers get points much more often than just pure engineers. So the idea of a tracking engineer getting points is a rare thing. It's nice, and I'm glad it's happening, and I think there should be more of that. There's artists out there that are, especially artists that don't have the regular major label deal, especially like DJs. I was working with a DJ a while back who, he makes records and has his own label and has an imprint and does some stuff through the major. And with artists, he's like, I'm just taking care of everybody. Everybody splits off the master. Everybody gets streaming royalties because that's the way it should be. I hope that the business model goes that direction. But
I believe it is. I mean, I know for a fact it is on certain that happens after a relationship is built. It's not the first. You can't just ask for that. But like, if you did a whole album with an artist and you're on call for them all the time,
whether royalty gets split with an outside mixer or it's just the credit, or you split the money, or you just get the credit but you also have another royalty. I think those things are incidental and maybe important to talk about, but those things are going to keep evolving. The idea that it's wild to me that, to go back to the beginning of the process, that producers, and I'm very fortunate because I'm a producer and a songwriter and a mixer and all this stuff. So I do bits of things all over the place, but there's a lot of songwriters that complain, why do these producers who can cook up a track really quickly with a splice loop and a couple of basic chords, why do they get 50% of the publishing? They didn't write 50% of the song. They made 10 beats in 2 days, and then I poured my heart and soul with the artist, and I get 25% of the song and the producer. And look, I'm not, I don't even necessarily want to get into that particular debate, but all of these things are in flux. And I think it's interesting to see how these roles are changing. I know that people are protective of the things that they're used to. People are also trying to evolve. They're very complicated topics, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Getting back to the initial thrust of this conversation, what else are you trying to do next? What's your next year? I mean, we're only in November, but we're getting into the end of the year. The music industry shuts down as of Thanksgiving. What's your
not for mixers? We're usually like second week of December. People are trying to wrap up.
Oh, totally. You guys are still working, but like the new things aren't generally getting booked. Yeah. At that point, you're definitely, and I'll keep working.
Wrapping up things.
Christmas Day, I don't give a shit. I do this shit.
Trying to detach myself from needing to be in one place all the time for mixing, which is part of the downsize. That's what's on my mind.
Just real quick, somebody asked, who is it? Somebody on Discord asked about your mixes at the Just for the Record when you're doing the streams versus your place. Did you notice a difference? I mean, I think it's a similar speaker setup, but did you have to make adjustments? Do you feel like your mixes were slightly different? Just being in a different room with similar speakers.
No, pretty similar. I mix with a lot more low end in that room, so I tweak it when I get back. I always drive home from the session with the rough, and I'm like, my car is shaking, like to the point where it's not.
Your studio at home has a lot more low end.
I don't know. I just don't know. That room is so fun when you're bumping in it that I'm like, because it's a big studio and it's like a treated room, and the low end just feels so good. I'm just like, give me more of it. And then in my room, I think it's a bit more like realistic to me, or just comfortable to me, that I know when it's too much low end in my room. That room is fucking phenomenal and I love it. But yeah, there's always something that I'm like, I'm not as tall when I mix in that room, and I come tweak it at my spot to bring height back for how I'm arranging. But I usually spend 15 minutes back in my room. It's that simple. Like, I can hear it right away. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I've never spent more than 30 minutes on a mix post Just for the Record. And it's very broad stroke changes.
So when you mix, and this is just the one incident, but going forward, if you're going to try to be in different spots, when you mix at this other studio, when you've been doing these streams at Just for the Record, you will never send it straight from there.
No,
you will. I mean, you'd probably, even if it was at your studio, you'd probably do an AirPod test or a car test or something. But you,
yes,
coming from that studio, you come back and you're always tweaking something at this spot that you know super well.
Yes, always for now. And that's going to have to change if, for example, I want to,
go to Paris.
Yeah. Or just my not simple, but one of my end of next year and a half goals would be to have a house in Santa Barbara. So if I were to mix there, I wouldn't want to have to drive back to LA to send. And that room would only be like a bedroom studio and have small speakers, small PMCs, probably with the same exact mix bus, but that would be it. So then I'd have to send from there. I'm not going to drive an hour and a half to listen and check. But that's like, I'm working on a headphone setup and trusting, a new source that will transfer with me or travel with me. And then that would be, yes, a month in Paris, sometime London, and be able to go travel a little bit, but also work. I feel very beholden to my space. Yeah. I feel it's just been so many years. And I think this is very much an in my head thing. I think I can't do it without it.
Yeah.
I check all the time. My homie Lars, another great mixer who's also on the chat right now. We'll text each other every now and then to be like, "Yo, did you try in the box yet?" Like, we'll just take our subgroups in and out of the box, and it just sounds better through our mix bus. It just sounds wider, deeper, and less like a demo in a lot of ways. And I can't not do that. That to me is like what's a bit. It's very obvious. And I think a lot of mixers would agree there. Some records are probably made to be mixed and stayed in the box. Very, very few. Tony used to do that all the time. He would try in the box, try different mix bus versions. He had 3 different setups where he could send subgroups to when I was mixing with him. And he would land normally in one of the 2 out of the box. And every now and then there was something about the way something was glued in the box. You couldn't beat it. But I think sometimes he was afraid to maybe change it too much versus I'll attempt to hear that and change it. And I usually lose, that. And Tony was always right when that happened. I'm just a little bit more, don't like myself as much maybe, and I'm like into torture. So that's what I'm into right now, is figuring out how to be less attached to the space. Maybe let other people use my space while I'm out of town. This is a cool space to create. Maybe I go away for 2 weeks and I let MattRad fucking come here, Tyler Johnson, do a residency of sessions with artists, like let the homies come use the space and, and just share the creativity and the space that's here, because it's a beautiful space to work in. So that's where I'm at. I'm not very far along there, but I'm thinking about it every day, and we'll see what happens.
Well, if you decide to leave January through March, I'm looking for a place in LA that I can make.
That won't be that won't. Damn, really? No, I don't think I'll be. I love, my favorite time in LA is January to March.
Yeah,
it's quiet. It's cold. It's
nice.
Like the industry kind of slowly
cold,
ramps in.
But it's not. You can't walk outside cold. It's LA cold.
It's LA cold.
Which is like, ooh, I can layer for the first time.
Oh, this morning I walked to the gym in the rain, and it was just so amazing. Like, I just loved it. 53 degrees outside, 7:30, walking to the gym, got some coffee. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
So that's where I'm at overall. I don't know how to make it happen. It scares me. And
good.
I think it's a good thing. So we'll see.
We got a couple. Maybe we can bang out a couple of quick questions before we go. First of all, I love doing this. I'm so glad. I haven't seen you on this in so long. I know people are really happy that we do these things and sort of forget periodically. It's so cool to see people active in the chat here. And I'll say again, the Discord has just been amazing the last couple of months. I've been jumping in here and there, but guys like Rory, guys like Keane, guys like Matt Beckley are really throwing lots and lots of knowledge there. It's cool.
We'll smart, all of them.
We'll have to sneak you on there here and there as well.
Oh gosh,
we'll do, like, because you can do voice stuff, you can do video stuff. You and I could go on there and do a little Q&A, just talk some shit. I know people would love that. Let's see. Somebody asked a question. I don't know that we've ever really talked about this. Do you do much? I did this recently a couple of times. Mix bus automation. Either, like, I've been doing the turning up the volume in an intro before a vocal comes in, just so it is a little bit louder. I did one thing with a widening thing in one part where I automated a little bit of widening on the mix bus, but there's always the risk that you lose some clarity or lose some center or something like that. Do you do any mix bus automation of any sort?
Mm-hmm. Rarely, but not what you're talking about necessarily. I'll do that with the individual tracks or subgroups, but I'll actually automate clippers and things in different sections of the mix bus. Will you do that? Will you specifically? I've run into this before where I have everything and it sounds amazing and crispy and loud and clear, except for one or two hits crunch a little too much. Is it that like you just back those off just the touch? That's not what I'm talking about, but you might have to do that too. That's usually something you have to find. Atmos is teaching me this, but the true peak, you have to hit no more than -1 on a true peak. For the Atmos file to not get kicked back by Apple Music or anywhere else. And -2 true peak actually sounds better overall. There's like a ratio kind of thing. This for another conversation. But we have to find, every now and then the true peak only peaks at one thing, and you have to find it's usually where a kick and a bass and a snare hit, where the snare is a little too much low end. So I treat the same thing on the mix bus. I'll find that in the sound sources, and I'll like, oh, that kick is visibly louder, and the way that the low end is hitting on that synth is impacting to make it happen. So I'll automate that. What I'm talking about is section to section, more like to create more density in a chorus and a little more space, but maintaining a loudness thing. I love the new clipper in Ozone 10 in the maximizer.
Ozone 10 is so good, and they're stupid. They got their little stabilizer soothe situation.
So that's what I'm about to bring up to the Oak Sound.
There's a little bit of the.
It's better. It's better. It's the reason why I think it's.
By the way, again, I've never used Soothe in any consistent way, but I've started using the stabilizer a little bit. It's really good. The transient thing is good on the limiter. The crunch of the soft.
It's really good.
It's really good.
So the thing about stabilizer that I like, I hung out with Dave Godowski the other day, and we went in, we got some hamburgers and talked about. Actually, I should mention something that I'm like, I want someone. I don't know if he's gonna bite on it, so I should just talk about it since Oak Sound's listening. Other people are listening. I think the coolest plugin that could be made, but it'd have to be defaulted and licensed to DAWs. So you wouldn't buy the plugin, or I guess you could do both ways, is a auto gain staging plugin. So built into the DAW, you would have everything trimmed down from recording to -6 without you knowing. And you could clip when you decide to clip, but you wouldn't. So for example, when you have a splice kick drum or a loop, it comes in at 0. So if you're in Ableton, and I've produced in Ableton for many years, if you put one sound in and you don't turn it down 6 dB, you're clipping and hitting 0 already based on your initial sound.
Yeah.
And that is absurd that dictates the final outcome of the thing. Now, for the super smart people that you I forgot their names, like especially the PC music guys, and like the super over compressed Dylan Brady stuff, over clip thing that you've shown me. That's artful limiting. I mean, artful clipping.
They're doing it deliberately.
Very deliberately. That is the exception to what I'm talking about, because that is so fucking beautiful and very intentional. It's intentional. And people on our chat everywhere, the question, big producers, like successful #1 consecutive producers, like, what's gain staging? The fact that nobody even knows what it is a problem. So if you could instantiate that,
didn't we?
We did. And I'm not trying to be the engineer guy that's like, oh, gain staging.
Yes, you are.
No, it's important. And I think if you didn't have to, if it was AI and we didn't have to think about it, like you can turn on heat in Pro Tools. I've just been told that this actually is pretty good. I've never used heat, but it's a button and it's on every channel. So you have this warm saturation thing on every channel, like a console emulator. That's cool. You could turn on auto gain staging. So when you're recording, every sound source is put to -6. So then everyone is hearing it that way from the start. I think that would solve a lot of headroom problems where when we're talking about the rolls, the arrangement itself will be determined.
Here's what you need. Here's what we need. We need Waves to do a CLA gain staging.
Oh my God. No, I don't want anybody to talk about it, market it. I want someone like Isotope, like Oak Sound, anybody to do it, license it to Ableton, license it to Logic, to Apple. Let Apple create it. Who the fuck cares who creates it? But have an auto gain staging. I think that would save a lot of issues in arrangement and stacking of things. Anyway, that was a little quick rant, but I want to talk about Stabilizer really quick because people are not sure what that is. It is Soothe. It's but it is way more subtle, which is my gripe about Soothe in general. When you put it on, it's very heavy-handed. There's 1,000 fucking reductions happening when you're doing and you can adjust the parameters for the sensitivity and the intensity of it and the depth to not be so deep, but it is harder to do that on Soothe. In Stabilizer, it is very obvious, user-friendly to how to minimize the amount of those tiny reductions that are happening. So I think it's a little bit more simply user-friendly. I don't care which one sounds better. I think that the Stabilizer will do more good than harm, and I still think Soothe does more harm than good on its default setting.
Well, they're definitely going to be reaching out to you again.
No, I'm setting it up. I'm in the email now. I'm going to talk to them.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Because who would I be? Who would I be as an engineer if I'm doing this? I'm emotionally weighted in my ranting to you and the community here, and then I refuse to talk to the plugin company.
We want better tools. We want better tools. Somebody said in the chat, Waves is going to reach out at some point, and you know, we're going to have like a week. It'll be like the G8 summit. They'll sit down with.
They already have. I left them on red. Just kidding. Okay. So mean.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we're at about an hour. I just want to ask you real quick, because and I think we have roughly the same view on this. Somebody, 7-footer, I think on the Discord, asked about the new Drake 21 Savage. Asked about 40 as a mixer. I think 40 and 40 and a few other people.
Love him.
There's a few other people. I love
just
the way
Gadget. Noah Gadget is his protege and the vocal engineer mostly, and then is helping finish mixing. So they're both mixing, but Noah has taken over the recording. From what I know, I've worked with their team once on the Girls Need Love remix that Drake jumped on for Summer Walker, and Noah was who I was talking to, Gadget, and he sent me the stem. for Drake and whatever. And like,
they're amazing.
They're amazing.
Always sound amazing.
The only thing I would say is that the vocals are still too loud.
Yeah,
it's I like it. I've heard a lot of people complain about it in my orbit, and it's just a little too loud. Where it's like, I get it. And I would think that the records would knock more if the vocal was just like a tiny bit lower. But they sound so good. They're so crispy, and like you hear every fucking consonant, and it's so good. He sounds amazing.
It's
they're great. I mean, 40 is one of the best. He's so
my
good.
favorite contemporary mixes. The like super bright. Tizio does it very well. The super bright mixes that don't sound harsh, or like just on the edge of it, are my favorite. Like, I love it when people do that well. And the Drake vocal always sounds so clear without being too bright and harsh. It's a brilliant vocal sound. So the short answer is, we love 40. We love that whole camp. We love 40. We love the way those records sound. John, I love you. It's so good to see you.
See you next week.
Yeah, I'll be down next week, and let's go get some food. I'm sure there's some new super fancy, amazing farm to table thing that you'll take me to.
I got a couple options for you.
Let's go. Thank you guys, as always, for watching these and participating. It's nice to be back. We'll be back the next bunch of weeks.
Cool.
Bye, guys.
Peace.